In the cold, indifferent void of space, where hope went to die and cynicism thrived like mold on old bread, Captain Thauron watched the endless sea of swirling storms through the viewport. It wasn't as calming as the brochures had promised. More like ominous, what with the lightning and all that red and white chaos. But hey, they weren't paying him to wax poetic about the view. "Captain, you're going to want to hear this," said Mackie, the comms specialist, whose idea of a balanced diet was a burger in one hand and a can of beer in the other. "If it's another love letter from your mom, I'm not interested," Thauron replied without turning around. "Nah, this is worse," Mackie said. "We've got ourselves a nice little problem." Thauron sighed, a sound like a deflating ego. "I'm all ears," he said, swiveling his chair. The comms room was cluttered with wires and screens. One might mistake it for the inside of a high-tech spaghetti monster if you squinted hard enough. Mackie gestured at a monitor showing a mess of signals. "Our communications just went down like a cheap bottle of whiskey." "Great," Thauron muttered. "What's causing it? Solar flares? Budget cuts?" "Aliens trying to sell us extended warranties." Mackie scratched his chin where a beard was conspicuously absent. "It's these signals," he said, pointing at the screen. "They're screwing with our language systems, makes everything sound like a first grader wrote it." Thauron frowned. "Maybe someone's hacked us with their kids' homework." Mackie didn't laugh. "Never did. It's not just us. It's affecting other platforms around Jupiter too. We're getting reports of language glitches all over. Communications just turn into gibberish, like someone's playing a cosmic game of Mad Libs." Thauron leaned over the console, staring at the chaotic waveforms. "Any idea who's behind it?" "No clue," Mackie said. "But I'm guessing it's not the kind of folks who send fruit baskets." "We should probably tell Earth," Thauron said. "Sure thing," Mackie replied, rolling his eyes. "Just as soon as we figure out how to make ourselves understood without sounding like we're ordering a pizza in Esperanto." Thauron picked up the nearest handheld. "Let's try old school," he said, tapping the keys. "Morse code." "You're kidding," Mackie snorted. "Does anyone even know Morse code outside of grainy war movies?" "I do, unfortunately," Thauron said, grinning in a way that suggested knowing Morse code was just one more of life's cruel jokes. He began tapping out a message with the urgency of a man trying to hail a taxi in a thunderstorm. "This better work," he muttered. "Or we'll be the first to go down in history as the guys who couldn't talk their way out of a paper bag." "History's not gonna remember us anyway," Mackie said. "But if it does, I hope they get my good side." As Thauron hammered away at the archaic code, the rest of the crew drifted in, curiosity piqued by the commotion. There was Vance, the engineer who knew more about machines than people, which was probably why he got along with them better. And Juno, the pilot, who could fly anything with wings, thrusters, or wheels. She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "What's all the noise? We inventing a new way to screw up?" "Just dealing with some friendly cosmic interference," Thauron replied, not missing a beat. Vance peered over Mackie's shoulder. "I thought this was supposed to be a routine mission." "Yeah, well, routine doesn't sell movie tickets," Juno said. "Besides, routine went out the airlock when we signed up for this gig. So what's the plan, fearless leader?" Vance asked. "We wait for a response," Thauron said, sitting back. "And hope it's something more than good luck you're screwed." "Sounds optimistic," Juno remarked, smirking. "What do we do in the meantime?" "Wait for the gas to mine itself. We stick to the plan," Thauron replied, trying to sound like he knew what he was doing. "Keep the platform running and keep an eye on those signals." Mackie shrugged. "I'll get right on that," he said, sitting back down at his console. "Assuming the language gremlins don't eat through my systems first." The crew dispersed, each to their stations. Silence settled over the room, a heavy, uncomfortable thing. Like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the universe to pull the rug out from under them. Hours crept by, marked only by the occasional sigh or the sound of a chair squeaking. Thauron watched the monitors like a man watches a pot that refuses to boil. "Any word yet?" "Nada," Mackie replied, rubbing his eyes. "Just more of the same." "It's like trying to have a conversation with a brick wall." At least the wall doesn't talk back, Thalron said, staring at the endless void outside. I'd like to keep it that way. Suddenly, the console beeped, a single, sharp sound that cut through the tension like a knife. Finally, Mackie muttered, leaning forward. We got a response. Don't keep us in suspense, Juno said, having wandered back in to see what the fuss was about. Mackie read off the message, his face a mix of confusion and annoyance. It's just more gibberish, lines and lines of it. Are you sure it's not just your handwriting? Thalron quipped, but the humor fell flat. This isn't funny, Mackie snapped. If this keeps up, we're going to be speaking gibberish ourselves. Gibberish might actually improve some of the conversations around here, Vance noted dryly. Thalron rubbed his temples, the weight of command pressing down like a 10-ton anvil. Okay, let's think. If we can't get through to Earth, maybe we can decode whatever this is on our own. So, we're linguists now? Juno asked, arching an eyebrow. Unless you've got a better idea, Thalron said, arms crossed. I've got nothing, she admitted. Then we try, Thalron said, more to himself than anyone else, and hope we don't end up as another mystery in the vastness of space. The crew set to work, piecing together the fragments of the anomaly like amateur detectives in a galactic whodunit. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. Hey, Mackie, Vance said after a while. You ever wonder if maybe we're just ants trying to understand quantum physics? Every day, Mackie replied, not looking up. And then I remember I don't get paid enough to care. Keep it up, Thalron said, cracking a smile. If we're lucky, maybe we'll get a raise out of this. And if not, Juno asked, her voice cutting through the banter. Then we'll just have to speak fluent gibberish, Thalron said, and hope the universe is a better listener than a talker. Hours later, as the crew pored over the data trying to make sense of the nonsensical, the console beeped again, demanding attention like a spoiled child. This time, the message was clear if unsettling. We are the voice of the void, Mackie read aloud, his tone more flat than usual. We speak through the silence. That's cryptic, Juno said, frowning. What does it mean? It means, Thalron said, eyes fixed on the screen, we're not alone. The Aegis creaked ominously, a groan that sounded too much like a bad omen for Thalron's taste. He shifted in his chair, the worn leather protesting under his weight. Mackie was at the console, poking at buttons like they owed him money. The rest of the crew lingered, their eyes flicking towards the screen like moths drawn to a really bad decision. You think these aliens have a Yelp page? Juno asked, arms folded as she leaned against the wall. I'd love to leave a review about their customer service. Yeah, but they'd probably just respond with more gibberish, Mackie said, not looking up. 1 star would not recommend. Vance, hunched over a tangled mess of wires, glanced up. You think they're trying to mess with us, or is this just how they say hello? Either way, it's a terrible first impression, Thalron replied, drumming his fingers on the armrest. And if they're trying to erase our languages, they've got a funny way of doing it. Funny like a punch to the face, Juno muttered. The beep of the console interrupted their grumbling. Mackie's eyes widened as he read the latest message. It's another one. Looks like our new pen pals are chatty. Let's see it, Thalron said, rising to peer over Mackie's shoulder. The message was a string of symbols and diagrams like someone had spilled a bowl of alphabet soup across the screen. Great. Now it's hieroglyphics, Vance said. Can we get a Rosetta Stone for this? Maybe we should call a linguist, Mackie suggested. Someone who's actually paid to deal with this nonsense. Yeah, Juno said, because those guys are just lining up to come out here. Can't wait to take a vacation to the middle of nowhere and look at alien scribbles. Actually, Thalron mused, I might know someone. Let me guess, Mackie said. Someone who owes you a favor. Not exactly, Thalron replied, already keying in a code on the console. More like someone I'd rather forget but who's too damn good at their job. The line crackled to life, a voice on the other end laced with irritation. Thalron, you son of a bitch. What do you want? Hello to you too, Dr. Corlin, Thalron said, grinning despite himself. I hope you've been practicing your ancient alien dialects. If by practicing you mean trying to avoid them, then yes, Dr. Vexy Corlin replied. What's the crisis? A little interference from the friendly neighborhood aliens, Thalron explained. Seems like they are messing with our comms and language systems. Well, that's different, Vexy said dryly. Most aliens just want to abduct cows or probe people, Vance chuckled. Maybe they're just warming up. Can you decode this mess? Thalron asked, ignoring the peanut gallery. I'll give it a shot, Vexy said. Send me what you've got and I'll see if I can make heads or tails of it. Mackie transmitted the data, fingers flying across the keys with a speed that suggested he'd rather be on a beach somewhere, preferably with a drink in hand. Got it, Vexy said after a moment. The sound of typing echoed through the comms system, punctuated by the occasional frustrated sigh. This is some kind of language virus. Language virus? Thalron echoed. Like a computer virus, but worse because it makes us sound like idiots. Something like that, Vexy replied. It's designed to dismantle linguistic structures, rendering communication impossible. Well, that's charming, Juno said deadpan. Take away our words and watch us flail around like fish out of water. Vance snorted. Fish probably have better communication skills than us right now. Why would they do this? Thalron asked, frowning at the screen. What's the end game, if I had to guess, Vexy said. I'd say they're trying to make sure we can't coordinate, can't plan, can't fight back if it comes to that. So, they disrupt our ability to communicate and then what? Mackie asked. Wait for us to implode from frustration. Pretty much, Vexy confirmed. Divide and conquer in a sense. Thalron let out a low whistle. Well, that's a neat trick. Any suggestions on how to stop it? I'll work on a countermeasure, Vexy said. But it's going to take time, and you might want to start brushing up on your charade skills in the meantime. Charades, Mackie muttered. Wonderful. I always wanted to play games in the face of impending doom. We're counting on you, Doc, Thalron said. And if you pull this off, I'll even buy you a drink or 10. I'll hold you to that, Vexy replied. Corlin out. The line went dead, leaving the crew to ponder their predicament. So, what now? Vance asked, fiddling with a loose wire. Do we just sit here and hope for the best? Hope's not exactly our strong suit, Juno pointed out. And we're running low on lucky charms. We keep things running, Thalron said, and stay vigilant. Whatever these aliens are up to, we're not going to make it easy for them. Spoken like a true pessimist, Mackie said with a wry grin. Just being realistic, Thalron shot back. Now, let's get to work before the whole platform starts speaking in tongues. The crew dispersed, diving into their tasks with an enthusiasm born of desperation. Thalron watched them go, a mix of pride and anxiety churning in his gut. It wasn't long before the first signs of the language virus began to creep into their systems. Screens flickered with garbled text, and previously straightforward commands now required an interpretive dance routine just to execute. Captain, Mackie called out, we've got a problem. We've got a lot of those, Thalron replied, striding over. Which one are you talking about? It's spreading, Mackie said, gesturing at his console. The virus, it's in the operating systems now. We're getting language errors everywhere. Damn it, Thalron muttered. Can we isolate it, lock it down? I'm trying, Mackie said, frustration etched into his features. But it's like trying to catch smoke with your bare hands. We need a containment strategy, Thalron said, thinking aloud. Something that won't require us to dismantle the whole damn platform. Good luck with that, Vance said, appearing at Thalron's side. This thing's spreading faster than gossip in a small town. We need to figure out how it's getting in, Juno added. Otherwise, we're just plugging holes in a sinking ship. The platform shuddered, a low rumble that made Thalron's stomach do a nervous flip. I've never been fond of roller coasters, he said, clutching the console for support. Better get used to it, Juno said. If this keeps up, we'll be going for a ride we didn't sign up for. Iors bled into each other as the crew fought to contain the virus. Thalron's optimism, never his strong suit to begin with, dwindled with each passing minute. When the console beeped again, it was almost a relief. It's Vexy, Mackie announced, putting the call on speaker. Got some good news for you, Vexy said, her voice crackling through the comms. I've developed a preliminary countermeasure. Preliminary, Thalron echoed, wary. It's still rough around the edges, Vexy admitted. But it should slow the virus down, give you a fighting chance. Slow it down, Juno repeated. Okay, so we're buying time until what? We wave a white flag. Until I can refine the countermeasure, Vexy clarified. Or until they get bored and leave us alone, whichever comes first. Well, that's reassuring, Vance said, rolling his eyes. Send it over, Thalron said. We'll take whatever we can get. The data transfer was quick, a little too quick for Thalron's liking. But beggars, as they say, couldn't be choosers. So how does this work? Mackie asked, examining the new code. Inject it into the mainframe, Vexy instructed. It should dampen the virus, slow its spread. Dampen? Sounds like we're putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, Juno remarked. Better than nothing, Thalron said. Let's do it. Mackie set to work, his fingers moving with the precision of a surgeon, albeit one who wasn't entirely sober. The platform hummed, its usual background noise now tinged with a sense of reluctant cooperation. Done, Mackie finally said, sitting back with a sigh. Now we wait. Waiting's always the hardest part, Thalron mused, staring out at the swirling chaos of Jupiter's storms. Especially when you don't know what you're waiting for. Here's hoping the aliens lose interest, Vance said, not sounding very hopeful at all. And if they don't? Juno asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. Then we keep fighting, Thalron said, as much a promise to himself as to them. We're not going down without a damn good fight. Famous last words, Mackie muttered, but there was a hint of camaraderie in his tone. The platform settled into a tense silence, each crew member focused on their tasks, their minds a whirlwind of what-ifs and maybes. They were a ragtag bunch, stuck on a floating tin can in the middle of a cosmic storm, their only lifeline a tenuous link to a linguist with a penchant for solving puzzles. Yet somehow, in the midst of uncertainty and chaos, they found a strange sense of purpose. A determination to hold their ground against an unseen enemy, to protect their fragile corner of the universe from being drowned in gibberish. And as Thalron watched the display, the data scrolling in orderly rows for the first time in Iors, he allowed himself a rare moment of optimism. Here's to making it out alive, he said softly, raising an imaginary glass to the indifferent void. Don't jinx it, Mackie replied, but there was a flicker of something almost like hope in his eyes. And so they waited, the Aegis a lone sentinel in the storm, each heartbeat a defiance against the cold, unfeeling dark. The Aegis hummed with the undercurrent of tension as the crew tried to navigate the new normal of linguistic chaos. Thalron had once imagined his days would be filled with the serene monotony of mining gas from Jupiter's swirling storms, not deciphering alien emojis like some galactic charades enthusiast. But here they were, trying to make sense of a mess the universe had kindly dumped in their laps. All right, folks, Thalron announced, gathering his crew around the main console, a hodgepodge of screens displaying whatever garbled nonsense the aliens were high on that day. We need to figure out a non-verbal communication system, something that doesn't rely on our comms playing nice. Mackie rolled his eyes, already flipping through a dog-eared notebook. Great. I've always wanted to be part of a silent movie in space. Just remember, Mackie, Juno chipped in, lounging against a panel with the air of someone who had seen it all and wasn't impressed by any of it. If this were a silent film, you'd be the comic relief. Ha ha, Mackie deadpanned. I'll make sure to trip over my own feet for extra laughs. Vance, perched atop a crate, untangling a mess of wires like some half-baked appraiser of spaghetti art, chimed in. How about color-coded flashcards? Red for we're screwed, yellow for we're almost screwed, and green for everything still screwed but with enthusiasm. Practical as always, Vance, Thalron said, rubbing his temples. Maybe if he pressed hard enough, a better idea would pop out like a toaster pastry. But I was thinking something a bit more. Practical smoke signals. Juno suggested, wiggling her fingers in the air. Oh wait, we're fresh out of campfires and Boy Scouts, Thalron sighed. How about hand signals then? Simple, to the point, and less likely to catch fire, Mackie nodded, jotting notes. Right. 1 finger for wait, 2 fingers for go, and 3 fingers for we're still screwed. Perfect, Thalron said, ignoring the sarcasm lacing Mackie's every word. Let's get those hand signals down before we run out of time. They practiced, awkward at first, like toddlers learning to communicate all over again. But necessity, as it turns out, was the best teacher. And with Mackie's relentless snark, Juno's sardonic wit, and Vance's pragmatic cynicism, they slowly built a repertoire of gestures that would give even the most seasoned mime a run for their money. It was a start, rough around the edges and held together with the kind of hope that bordered on desperation. But it was theirs, and somehow that made it feel like a victory, however small. Captain, Vance called out, breaking the silence of their impromptu training session. I've got something you might want to see. Thalron joined him, peering over his shoulder at the tangle of wires he'd been toying with. What have you got? Anomalies in the system, Vance said, pointing at a readout that looked like a Jackson Pollock painting. I think the aliens are probing us. More aggressively. Pray it's not the kind of probing that involves latex gloves, Juno quipped, earning a snort from Mackie. Whatever they're doing, Vance continued, ignoring the peanut gallery, it's screwing with our systems. Power fluctuations, data blips. It's like they're testing our resilience or screwing with us for sport, or both, Thalron muttered. Because why choose? We need to find a way to block them, Mackie said, scribbling in his notebook like a mad scientist on a caffeine bender. Or at least slow them down. That countermeasure of Vexies isn't buying us enough time. Juno asked. It's doing its job, Vance explained, but these guys seem to be adapting. And fast. Great, Thalron said. Smart aliens are my favorite kind. They huddled together, a team united by necessity and a mutual disdain for the cards they'd been dealt. Each idea they threw on the table was dissected, chewed on, and spat out when it didn't measure up. It was an exercise in futility, punctuated by moments of brilliance that felt like finding a diamond in a pile of garbage. Mackie was the first to suggest using the ship's redundant systems as a decoy, drawing the aliens' attention away from their core functions. It was risky, the kind of plan that could backfire spectacularly. But it was also the best shot they had, and when you're playing poker with an empty hand, you bluff like hell. All right, Thalron said, let's set it up. Vance, you're on wiring. Mackie, coordinate with me to implement the decoy. Juno, keep an eye on any unusual activity. And by unusual, you mean anything that isn't us floundering like idiots. Juno asked. Precisely, Thalron replied, a hint of a grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. They moved with purpose, a dance choreographed by necessity and adrenaline. Each mistake was a lesson, each success a fleeting moment of relief in an otherwise unforgiving storm. It was chaos, the kind that breeds innovation and desperation in equal measure, a testament to humanity's penchant for surviving against all odds. The decoy was set, a kludge of wires and circuits designed to scream, look over here. In a language the aliens couldn't ignore. It was a gamble, high stakes and higher risks, but it was all they had. All right, Thalron said, surveying their handiwork. Let's flip the switch and see if we can fool the bastards. Here's hoping it doesn't blow up in our faces, Mackie said, fingers poised over the console like a pianist about to hit the first note of a symphony. Vance chuckled darkly. I didn't sign up for fireworks, but I guess there's a first time for everything. On 3, Thalron said. 1, 2, 3, Mackie finished, pressing the button with a flourish. The platform vibrated, a low hum that thrummed through the walls like an ancient beast stirring from slumber. For a moment, everything seemed to hold its breath, the universe pausing as if contemplating their audacity. And then, like magic, the lights stabilized, the screens stopped their epileptic dance, and the air felt less charged with impending doom. I think it worked, Mackie said, sounding more surprised than triumphant. We're still alive, Juno confirmed, checking the readouts. For now, anyway. Let's not get too comfortable, Thalron warned. We might have bought ourselves some time, but it's only a matter of. A sudden jolt cut him off, the platform lurching violently, sending them sprawling like marionettes with their strings cut. Alarms blared, the lights flickering as if trying to decide whether to stay on or plunge them into darkness. "Well, that escalated quickly," Juno said, picking herself up off the floor with a groan. "What the hell was that?" Vance demanded, eyes darting across panels as he tried to make sense of the chaos. "Looks like the aliens didn't take too kindly to our meddling," Thauron said. "They're hitting back. Hard," Mackie added, his voice a mix of irritation and begrudging respect. "Gotta hand it to them, they don't mess around. Status report," Thauron barked, trying to restore some semblance of order. Vance was already on it, fingers flying over controls, pulling up diagnostics. "We've got system breaches all over. They're poking holes like it's damn Swiss cheese." "Fantastic," Thauron muttered. "Mackie, Juno, see what you can do to patch us up." With a flurry of movement, they dove into the fray, each crew member an essential gear in the clockwork of their survival. The Aegis shuddered under the alien onslaught, the very bones of the platform groaning in protest. It was a struggle, every second a battle against an invisible foe, the air thick with tension and the acrid scent of burnt circuitry. They worked tirelessly, a chaotic ballet of movement and urgency, racing against time and the whims of a universe that seemed hell-bent on their demise. Somewhere amid the chaos, Thauron found himself at the console, barking orders and rallying his crew like a general at war. It was madness, the kind that strips away pretense and leaves only raw determination in its wake. "This is it, folks," he called out, his voice steady despite the turmoil. "Let's show these bastards what we're made of." Mackie grinned, his expression a mix of defiance and exhilaration. "Here's to going down swinging. And taking a few of them with us," Juno added, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. They fought on, a ragtag band of misfits in a tin can, defying the odds with a blend of grit, ingenuity, and sheer stubbornness. And though the outcome was uncertain, and the storm raged on with relentless fury, they stood their ground. Somewhere in the back of his mind, Thauron realized that they were not just fighting for survival but for something more abstract, more profound. They were fighting for the right to be human, with all the flaws and brilliance that entailed. "Ready?" he asked, locking eyes with his crew, their determination mirrored in his own. "Damn right we are," Mackie replied, his voice a lifeline in the storm. And with that they plunged into the fray, united in purpose, driven by the indomitable spirit that had brought them this far. In that moment, they were not just survivors but warriors, carving their names into the fabric of the cosmos with every defiant heartbeat. The Aegis was shaking like a maraca in the hands of a toddler on a sugar high. Captain Thauron couldn't help but wonder what in the universe they'd done to piss off the cosmos this much. Jupiter loomed outside the viewports, its swirling storms mocking their puny human struggles with every violent spin. "Mackie, get me that status report," Thauron barked, gripping the console like it was a life raft in a sea of chaos. "On it, Captain," Mackie replied, fingers dancing over the keys. "If the ship survives my typing, we're golden." Juno, sprawled out on the floor after the latest tremor, looked up with her usual unimpressed expression. "You ever feel like the universe is just screwing with us for shits and giggles?" "Every damn day," Thauron replied, helping her to her feet. Vance, elbow deep in a panel of wires, muttered something that was probably a curse in several languages. "We've got more malfunctions than a botched alien autopsy. Whatever these signals are, they're practically tearing us apart from the inside out." "Great," Thauron sighed. "Not exactly the probing I was hoping for." Enter Chief Engineer Zenter, a man who looked like he hadn't slept since the 20th century and smelled like it too. He approached with the kind of energy only the clinically insane or hopelessly caffeinated could muster. "Captain, I've got an idea. It's risky, but when you're playing Russian roulette with all the chambers loaded, who cares? Risky." "That's our middle name," Thauron replied, gesturing for Zenter to continue. Zenter slammed a schematic onto the nearest flat surface, his fingers tracing lines with the precision of a mad artist. "We turn the Aegis into a giant Faraday cage. Isolate us from the external signals. Mackie raised an eyebrow. You want to wrap us in tinfoil and hope the aliens don't notice? Pretty much, Zenter said with a grin. It's janky as hell, but it might just work. Juno snorted. We're betting our lives on janky. Well, that's comforting. Got any better ideas? Zenter challenged, his eyes gleaming with that peculiar engineer's blend of desperation and genius. Nope, Juno admitted, but I don't have a death wish either. All right, Zenter, walk us through it, Thalron said, leaning over the schematic as the platform shuddered again. We're all ears. Mostly because everything else is falling apart. Zenter launched into a rapid-fire explanation, punctuated with gestures that threatened to take out anyone within arm's length. We reroute the existing power systems, use redundant wiring, and create a shield. It'll block external signals and, with luck, isolate us. It's a long shot, but it's better than sitting here waiting for the next alien love tap. Long shots are what we live for, Thalron said. Mackie, Vance, we need every available hand to make this work. Juno, coordinate with them and let's see if we can jury-rig ourselves a miracle. With a collective nod, they all set to work. The air hummed with urgency and the faint scent of burning wires, like the perfume of some very angry god. Mackie was in his element, notebook in one hand, the other flying over the console with practiced ease. Zenter, if this plan goes south, we'll be the ones fried, not the circuits. Noted, Zenter replied, pulling out a roll of duct tape like a magician revealing his secret weapon. This stuff's held more space stations together than I can count. Vance glanced over, his expression skeptical. Duct tape? Really? Zenter shrugged. Don't knock it. If it's good enough for Mars missions, it'll do for us. The team moved in a flurry of motion, a chaotic ballet of wires, panels, and muttered expletives. In the background, the Aegis groaned and creaked, protesting their every move like a stubborn old man refusing to take his medicine. Hey, Zenter, Mackie called out, you ever think about what happens if this doesn't work? Not really, Zenter answered, not looking up from the panel he was eviscerating. I'm more of a plan for success kind of guy, optimism, huh? Mackie smirked. Can't say I'm used to that around here. Don't get too comfortable, Juno chimed in. If we get out of this, we'll go back to being the same miserable lot we've always been. I'd expect nothing less, Mackie replied, a hint of a smile in his voice. They worked with the kind of desperation usually reserved for people trapped in collapsing mines or sinking ships. Every moment counted, every decision was a gamble, and every success felt like a borrowed miracle. Thalron moved between them, offering the occasional word of encouragement, more for his own sanity than theirs. Keep it up, team. We might just pull this off. Don't jinx us, Captain, Vance warned, fiddling with a stubborn piece of equipment. Last thing we need is fate deciding to step in and finish us off. Fate's got nothing on us, Thalron replied. We're too damn stubborn to die. The Ior stretched on, time losing meaning in the haze of focused chaos. Sleep was a luxury and sanity was optional. But inch by painstaking inch, they pieced together Zenter's plan, a patchwork of technology and raw human willpower. Finally, Zenter stood back, wiping his greasy hands on his jumpsuit with a flourish. All right, it's as ready as it'll ever be, so we flip the switch and hope we don't blow ourselves into next week. Juno asked, crossing her arms as if the act alone would keep the universe at bay. That's the plan, Zenter confirmed. If it doesn't work, well, there's always the next life. Mackie rolled his eyes. Great motivational speech, Zen. Really fills me with confidence. Shut it, Mackie, Thalron said, but there was no real heat in his words. Everyone get to your stations. Let's see if we can't pull off a miracle. With a deep breath and a silent prayer to any benevolent deities that might be listening, Thalron gave the order. Zenter, do it. The engineer nodded, fingers hovering over the control panel like a pianist about to unleash a symphony of chaos. He punched a series of commands with the flair of a Vegas magician, and the Aegis responded with a low, almost reluctant rumble. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Silence reigned, oppressive in its absence of disaster. Then the platform gave a sort of shiver, and the lights flickered once twice, before stabilizing in a soft glow that was almost comforting. Well, that's either a good sign or the precursor to our atomic disintegration, Mackie said, peering around as if expecting the walls to implode at any moment. Systems are holding, Vance reported, his voice a mix of awe and disbelief. No external signals coming through. Thalron let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Seems like we might have just bought ourselves some breathing room. Don't uncork the champagne just yet, Juno cautioned, still eyeing the readouts. We've managed to put a band-aid on a gaping wound. This is temporary at best. Temporary's better than nothing, Thalron replied, allowing himself a small smile. Let's not waste what we've got. The crew dispersed, each member returning to their tasks with renewed purpose. The Aegis still shuddered occasionally, but it felt less like a death rattle and more like the grumbling of a crotchety old ship not ready to give up just yet. As the Iors crept by, Thalron found himself at the viewport, staring out at Jupiter's eternal storms. They were a reminder of the chaos and beauty that existed beyond their tiny bubble of fragile peace. Mackie joined him, leaning against the wall with a casualness that belied the tension still simmering beneath the surface. Think we'll ever get out of this mess? Is that optimism I hear? Thalron asked, glancing over with a raised eyebrow. Maybe just wishful thinking, Mackie replied, a ghost of a grin playing at his lips. Figured I'd try it on for size. Doesn't fit all that well, Thalron chuckled, a sound that felt foreign after the past few days. I think we'll make it. We're too damned stubborn not to, spoken like a true pessimist with delusions of grandeur. I'm full of surprises, Thalron said, watching as another storm unfurled across Jupiter's surface like a cosmic tapestry. A forbidden thought, but perhaps the universe had a sense of humor after all. Together they stood in silence, two weary souls in a vast, uncaring universe, but somehow, against all odds, still standing. The Aegis was holding together. Barely. It creaked and groaned like a geriatric warhorse that should have been put out to pasture several space ages ago. Captain Thalron stood in the control room, mulling over the ship's schematics as the Aegis shuddered beneath his feet. Around him, the crew clung to their stations with the desperation of people who knew that disaster was always a loose wire away. Mackie, ever the optimist, was busy typing furiously at the console, trying to decipher the latest batch of alien gibberish. Her fingers flew over the keys like caffeinated spiders, only occasionally pausing when the ship's systems decided to switch languages mid-sentence. I've never felt smarter, she quipped, not looking up from the screen. Every time I almost understand something, it changes into something else. It's like trying to read Shakespeare while someone's tap dancing on the Rosetta Stone. Sounds like my kind of fun, Juno said, sprawled out on the floor and staring blankly at the ceiling as if it might offer some cosmic insight. At least you're getting some exercise. I'm just getting a headache, Thalron sighed, rubbing his temples. Let's not kid ourselves. We're screwed, Vance, stuck with the unenviable task of keeping the systems from crashing, poked his head out from under a mess of wires. Captain, if I hear one more beep, I'm going to start smashing things. Just a heads up, join the club, Thalron replied, wishing he could chuck the entire console out an airlock. But that would be bad for morale. And oxygen. Zenter, the ship's resident mad scientist, was fiddling with a device that looked like it had been cobbled together from bits of medieval torture equipment and a discarded microwave. I'm working on a backup plan. It involves reversing the polarity of the neutron flow, doesn't everything? Juno muttered, rolling her eyes. Zenter shot her a look that was equal parts mad genius and sleep deprivation. Laugh all you want, but this baby might just save our asses. If it doesn't blow us up first. Well, that's reassuring, Mackie said, finally looking up from her console. Do we get to vote on who tests it? I'm happy to volunteer, Zenter said with a grin that was more than a little unhinged. I've always wanted to see what being atomized feels like. Fascinating as that sounds, let's keep you in one piece for now, Thauron said, shaking his head. We've got enough problems without having to mop you off the walls. The irony of it all was that the Aegis was supposed to be a marvel of modern engineering, a state-of-the-art gas mining platform orbiting Jupiter. Instead, it felt more like a floating death trap, held together by duct tape and sheer bloody-mindedness. They were supposed to be mining gas, not trying to decode alien Sudoku while the ship fell apart around them. But life was never that simple, was it? A sudden lurch nearly knocked Thauron off his feet, and the lights flickered ominously. I hate to be a pessimist, he said, steadying himself, but this feels like the part where everything goes to hell. Only feels like that because it's true, Juno pointed out unhelpfully. Vance emerged from his nest of wires, looking more harried than usual. We've got a real problem. The signals are getting stronger. Whatever's out there, it's ramping up its efforts to screw with us. Perfect, Thauron muttered. We're running out of time. Ideas, Zenter glanced up from his latest contraption. We could always try reasoning with the aliens. Maybe they'll go easy on us if we promise not to blow up their planet. Not sure they'd take that trade, Mackie said. Especially since we can't communicate with them without turning into babbling idiots. Good point, Thauron admitted. All right, let's focus on keeping the systems running. If we can stabilize the ship, we might have a chance. They were interrupted by a series of loud, jarring beeps from Mackie's console. Her normally calm demeanor cracked into a look of pure frustration. I swear, if this console makes one more noise, I'll turn it into scrap. Join the line, Thauron said. Might as well get in some target practice. The crew settled back into their tasks, each one a cog in the barely functioning machine that was the Aegis. The atmosphere was tense, a cocktail of fear and determination, with a dash of what the hell are we doing, iors dripped by like molasses, each one filled with the kind of focused chaos that made you question your life choices. The Aegis continued to creak and groan, the sounds a grim reminder of their fragile existence. Hey, Thauron, Vance called out from across the room. You ever think about what you'd be doing if you weren't stuck out here? Not really, Thauron replied. But I imagine it would involve fewer existential crises. Maybe, Vance said, a wry smile on his face. Or maybe just different ones, comforting thought, Thauron said, turning his attention back to the schematics. Let's focus on not dying first, then we can worry about life choices. Mackie's console beeped again, and she let out a growl of frustration. I'm starting to think this thing is just messing with me for fun. Juno chuckled from her spot on the floor. Maybe it's lonely. Poor console just wants a bit of attention. Attention it can have, Mackie said, giving the console a smack. Just not the homicidal kind. As the crew worked, a sense of camaraderie emerged from the chaos. They were a ragtag bunch, thrown together by circumstance, but there was a strange comfort in knowing they were all in it together. The Aegis was a piece of junk, the universe was indifferent at best, and the aliens, well, who the hell knew what they wanted? But they had each other, and that was something. Or maybe it was just the lack of oxygen talking. Either way, Thauron wasn't going to question it. The iors dragged on, and with each passing moment the signals seemed to grow stronger, more insistent. It was as if the aliens were playing a cosmic game of chicken, daring the crew to blink first. Thauron was about to suggest a break when the ship lurched again, harder this time, sending them all scrambling to stay upright. Anyone have a clue what that was? Vance checked his readouts, his expression grim. That was the comm system giving up the ghost. We're officially cut off. Great, Thauron muttered. Just what we needed. The sense of isolation that settled over them was palpable, a heavy weight that pressed down on their shoulders like a lead blanket. Without communication, they were adrift, left to their own devices in a universe that seemed hell-bent on wiping them out. The silence stretched, awkward and oppressive, until Juno broke it with a laugh that was more than a little unhinged. Well, at least we're stuck with each other. Could be worse, right? Not sure how, Mackie said. But I'm sure we'll find out soon enough. As they worked, Thauron's thoughts drifted to the bigger picture, or at least what he hoped was the bigger picture. He had a crew to keep safe, a ship to hold together, and a universe that seemed to take a sick pleasure in watching them squirm. But for now, all he could do was focus on the task at hand and hope that somehow, against all odds, they'd find a way through. Zenter tinkered with his latest contraption, the sparks flying in a way that was both impressive and slightly terrifying. "This might just do it," he said, nodding to himself. "If I can get it working, we might be able to block those signals long enough to get the comms back online." "Let's hope so," Thauron said. "Otherwise, we're in for a long, silent trip to nowhere." "Wouldn't be the first time," Juno said, shrugging. "At least we'll have a front row seat to Jupiter's storms." "Silver linings," Mackie said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Always nice to know we can count on those." The Aegis groaned again, but the crew barely flinched. They were used to it by now, the background noise of their lives on this creaky old ship. Despite the odds stacked against them, they kept going, driven by a mixture of desperation and stubbornness. They had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but they were determined to face it head-on, come hell or high water. Or alien interference. As the hours ticked by, the ship's systems continued to fail, one by one, until it felt like they were clinging to the remnants of a dream. The lights flickered, the air grew stale, and the console's ever-present beeping became a distant memory. It was a grim reminder that they were on borrowed time, but the crew refused to give up. They were like cockroaches, hard to kill and even harder to get rid of. "Thauron," Vance said, breaking the silence. "If we get through this, drinks are on me." "Wildly optimistic," Thauron replied, a hint of a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "But I'll hold you to it." "Damn right," Juno said. "I'm going to drink until I forget this whole mess. Or until you remember why you signed up in the first place," Mackie added, her voice tinged with mockery. "Let's not get crazy," Thauron said, shaking his head. "One crisis at a time." As the ship rocked beneath them, a testament to resilience, or perhaps sheer luck, they found a strange comfort in their shared misery. They might be adrift in an uncaring universe, but they had each other, and for now that was enough. Or at least it would have to be. With the Aegis teetering on the brink, the crew braced themselves for whatever came next, ready to face the unknown with the kind of grim determination that only came from having nothing left to lose. In the silence that followed, there was a sense of acceptance, of what they were and what they might become. They were survivors, after all, and they'd fight tooth and nail to stay that way. Together, they'd find a way through the darkness, one sarcastic comment at a time. The Aegis tilted, a bad roller coaster ride for anyone with a stomach. Captain Thauron steadied himself against the console that seemed determined to make a career out of beeping in Morse code for "screw you." "Anyone else feel like we're trapped in a cosmic sitcom?" he muttered. "The kind where the universe keeps throwing pies in your face," Mackie snorted, fingers flying over her console. "If this is a sitcom, it's one of those that gets canceled after a pilot," she said. "And the punchline's always the same. Surprise, you're still screwed." Juno groaned from her spot on the floor, head propped up with a dirty rag that screamed for retirement. Plot twist. We get saved, only to find out we're in another mess just like this one. Gotta admit, it's growing on me." She closed her eyes, trying to will away the persistent headache that had taken up residence somewhere behind her eyeballs. Vance was halfway buried in a tangle of wires, his face a study in frustration. "I've seen more stability in a politician's promise," he grumbled, yanking another wire free with the precision of a man taking a sledgehammer to a clock. "Speaking of promises, how are we doing on that not-dying plan?" Juno asked, her voice bouncing off the walls with the practiced ease of someone who'd long since given up on dreading the inevitable. Thauron rolled his eyes. "We're maintaining. Barely." "Which is the space equivalent of treading water with a brick in your backpack." Zenter, ever the enthusiast for all things potentially lethal, looked up from a device that looked like it belonged in a museum next to medieval torture devices. "If this works," he said, patting it like a beloved pet, We might have a way to block those pesky signals. And if it doesn't, Mackie asked, eyebrows raised. We join the stars. Zenter shrugged, the kind of guy who could look at a noose and see a necktie. Optimistic, Thalron said, a dry smile playing on his lips. But let's aim for the still-breathing option first. The ship shuddered again, the kind of shudder that spoke of systems on the edge of giving up and signing early retirement papers. Thalron winced, the sound like nails on a chalkboard to his nerves. "All right, team," he said, taking a deep breath. "Let's recap. Communications are toast. The ship's falling apart, and aliens are playing mind games with us. So any bright ideas?" A silence followed, thick enough to chew. It hung there, waiting for someone to blink first. "Actually," came a voice that was all too familiar, and yet had been suspiciously absent from the usual chaos. "Doctor." Corlin, the ship's linguist, whose appearance was more of a surprise than a malfunction-free day on this bucket of bolts. "Corlin, where the hell have you been?" Thalron asked, equal parts surprise and annoyance. "Deciphering alien Sudoku," Corlin replied, holding up a data pad filled with patterns that looked like an art student's nightmare. "Turns out, I've cracked a pattern in their signals." "It's not much, but it's something." The crew turned as one, a ragtag bunch of skeptics, each deciding whether to be hopeful or just more cynical. "And this pattern does what exactly?" Juno asked, her voice laced with the kind of sarcasm reserved for salesmen and miracle cures. "It suggests a weakness," Corlin said, not missing a beat. "A sequence we can exploit. If we play our cards right, we might just have a chance to disable whatever's messing with us." Vance, who'd been focusing on not getting electrocuted, looked up. "You mean we might actually win one for a change?" "I didn't say that," Corlin corrected, the corners of his mouth twitching upwards. "But we might move from screwed to less screwed." "What's the plan?" Thalron asked, his voice the only thing that seemed steady on this ship. Corlin took a deep breath, the kind that heralds both genius and disaster. "We need to send a counter-signal, something to disrupt their interference." "And how do we do that?" Mackie asked, half expecting the answer to involve a lot of luck and even more duct tape. "That's where Zenter's little toy comes in," Corlin said, nodding at the contraption that looked ready to launch the whole crew into a new dimension. Zenter grinned, the kind that made you question how many screws were actually loose in his head. "If we amplify this signal just right, we might just give them a taste of their own medicine." Thalron sighed, feeling the weight of a future where this plan backfired spectacularly. "All right, let's do it. We've got nothing to lose but our lives, and frankly, they're worth more as betting chips right now." As they moved to make the plan a reality, the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't hope, not quite. It was more like a grudging acceptance that they could maybe, just maybe, punch the universe right back in the cosmic face. "Let's get to work," Thalron said, his voice a blend of authority and the kind of resignation you develop after years of shoveling crap and hoping it turns into gold. Iors blurred together in a mess of sparks, sweat, and swearing. It was the sort of chaotic ballet that space travel seemed to inspire, if ballet involved a lot more cursing and significantly more chances of getting fried. Juno was running cables like an ancient mariner casting lines, while Vance performed feats of electrical engineering that would have gotten him a Nobel Prize back on Earth, assuming he wasn't zapped first. Mackie handled the console, inputting data with the kind of precision that made you forget she'd once nearly blown up a module, because she thought the red button was decorative. Thalron moved from station to station, offering advice, encouragement, and the occasional sarcastic remark when needed. It was teamwork at its finest, or at least as fine as a ragtag team on a ship held together by hope and old gum could manage. Finally, Zenter stepped back from his creation, wiping his hands on a rag that had seen too many spills and not enough washes. "It's ready," he announced, his voice filled with the kind of pride typically reserved for someone about to win a Darwin Award. "All right," Thalron said, taking a moment to steel himself against the possibility of imminent death. "Let's fire it up." The device hummed to life with a sound somewhere between an enthusiastic cat purring and an impending explosion. Everyone held their breath, waiting for either salvation or annihilation. The lights flickered, stuttered, and then stabilized. For a heartbeat, there was silence, sweet, blessed silence. Then the console lit up with a series of confirmations. "It's working," Mackie said, wide-eyed and as disbelieving as everyone else. "We're blocking the signal, at least for now." Thalron let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "I'll take for now over never any day of the week. Feels like we just cheated death," Vance commented, wiping sweat off his brow with the back of his hand. Again, Juno chuckled, a sound that was mostly relief with a hint of hysteria. "Lucky for us, death's got terrible aim." Thalron nodded, feeling a strange mix of triumph and dread. They'd won a battle, sure, but the war was far from over. Still, for the moment, they'd gained a reprieve, a chance to catch their breath before the universe decided to throw its next curveball. "You know," Mackie said, half grinning as she leaned back in her chair, "we might actually make it out of this in one piece." "Don't jinx it," Thalron warned, though his smirk was impossible to hide. "Last thing we need is the universe hearing us." The crew shared a moment, caught between the tension of survival and the ridiculousness of their situation. They were still in the middle of a cosmic storm, but for now, they had a raft. A leaky, patched-up raft, but a raft nonetheless. As the Aegis continued its orbit around Jupiter, the storms outside mirrored the chaos they'd just navigated. The universe was vast, indifferent, and more often than not, a complete bastard. But for this moment, they'd eked out a victory, however small. "All right, folks," Thalron said, clapping his hands together in a rare show of optimism. "Let's get this ship back on course. We've got a whole lot of nothing to get back to." The crew dispersed, each returning to their tasks with the kind of determination that comes from surviving against the odds. There was work to be done, endless repairs, plans for contingencies they didn't want to think about, and, of course, the ever-present threat of alien interference. But for now, they had a chance. A fighting chance in a universe that seemed determined to see them fail. Thalron watched his crew with a sense of pride and something that almost resembled hope. "Let's see what you've got, universe," he muttered under his breath, a challenge to the stars that twinkled mockingly outside the viewport. "We're not done yet." As the crew worked, the ship's hum settled into a rhythm that felt almost comforting. The Aegis was no marvel of engineering, but it was their home, and they'd be damned if they let it fall apart. Thalron leaned back in his chair, watching the storm clouds of Jupiter swirl beneath them. They had a ways to go, but he had faith in his crew. They were stubborn, relentless, and just crazy enough to think they could make a difference. Maybe they wouldn't change the universe, but they'd survive it, one sarcastic remark at a time. The Aegis groaned again, a noise that had become the ship's default form of communication. If it could talk, its vocabulary would solely consist of expletives and cries for a mechanic. Captain Thalron stood in the command center, watching his crew as they tackled their tasks with a mixture of desperation and stubborn optimism. "Right," Thalron announced, clapping his hands together in the universal gesture for "let's get this cluster of chaos moving. We've got Corlin's nerdy breakthrough. Let's put it to use before something else decides to try and kill us." Mackie rolled her eyes but smirked as she punched a few buttons on her console like it owed her money. "You mean something other than this ship, right?" "Because it's definitely trying." "It's a love-hate relationship," Thalron replied, moving to stand by Zenter, who was fiddling with his beloved contraption, affectionately dubbed the Signal Slayer, with the gusto of a mad scientist moments away from a eureka moment or a fiery end. Zenter glanced up, his eyes wide with the kind of excitement usually reserved for children on Christmas morning or sociopaths testing new weapons. "She's ready, Cap. Ready to save us or ready to explode." Juno piped up, sprawled on the floor, trying to convince a headache that had taken up residence in her skull to move out. "6 of one, half a dozen of the other," Zenter replied with a shrug. "But it's got a 50% chance of disrupting the signal, so that's something. Doctor." Corlin, their resident language wizard and part-time hermit, stepped forward, looking oddly calm for someone in a perpetual state of being one wrong turn away from an aneurysm. Let's just hope their Sudoku doesn't translate to kaboom. Mackie raised an eyebrow. Is that a technical term, Doc? It's whatever you want it to be, Corlin shot back with a wry smile. As long as it works, Thalron sighed. All right, people, let's do this. Engage the device. Vance, who had been diligently untangling wires like they were the Gordian knot, nodded. Here goes nothing. He flicked a switch that looked suspiciously homemade and the signal slayer crackled to life. The ship hummed, vibrated, then steadied, as though it had finally decided to stop throwing a tantrum. There was a brief moment of tense silence, the kind of silence that makes you wonder if the universe is taking a deep breath before delivering the punchline. Anything? Thalron asked, glancing between Mackie and Corlin as if they were the eyewitnesses to a cosmic miracle. Mackie's console beeped, not the usual Morse code symphony but a steady, predictable rhythm. Communications are partially restored, she said, disbelief painting her tone. And I think I just got a signal from the main outpost. You're kidding, Thalron said, a grin threatening to split his face in two. Maybe we should start buying lottery tickets. I'd rather stick with sure things, Juno muttered, rubbing her temples. Like taxes and death. Corlin was busy scrutinizing the data pad, his brow furrowed. It's faint, but the interference is definitely down. We've got a chance to push them back. How? Vance asked, still wary of his improvised wiring not spontaneously combusting. We need to amplify a counter-signal, Corlin explained. Something to meddle with their Sudoku, make it look like a child's doodle. Zenter was already one step ahead. I can rig the Slayer to broadcast our own interference back. Give them a taste of their own medicine, like serving a cold dish of revenge but without the calories. Sounds like a plan, Thalron agreed. Let's give it a shot. Worst case, we end up where we started, minus a few more hairs. With the same kind of efficiency that would look impressive if they weren't all so sleep-deprived, and on the verge of existential crises, the crew got to work. Mackie fed the necessary data into the console while Vance steadily, albeit reluctantly, increased the power to Zenter's invention. The Aegis's lights dimmed slightly as the device sucked in power. A low hum filled the cabin, a sound somewhere between a swarm of bees and a poorly tuned orchestra. Anything yet? Thalron asked, his knuckles turning white from gripping the edge of the table. Corlin squinted at his screen, the tension so thick it could have been cut with a laser scalpel. Wait for it. Yes, the interference is fluctuating. We're disrupting their control. Juno's eyes flicked open, a small smile playing on her lips. Looks like we might not die today. Speak for yourself, Mackie retorted. I almost missed the days where our biggest problem was running out of coffee. Those were the days, Vance drawled, twisting a few more wires into compliance. Now it's just space monsters and malfunctioning tech. Thalron chuckled, the sound rusty from disuse. Still, I'd rather tango with space monsters than deal with Earth bureaucracy. The device reached a crescendo, a final burst of energy that made the ship shudder before settling into a steady vibration. The signal on Mackie's console stabilized, a clear stream devoid of alien interference. It's holding, Mackie confirmed, triumph in her voice. We did it. A cheer went up from the crew, the kind of ragtag celebration that involved a lot of relieved laughter and almost hysterical high fives. Thalron allowed himself a moment of satisfaction, reveling in the unlikely victory. Nice work, everyone, he said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd expected doom and got a reprieve instead. Let's keep monitoring the situation. We don't know how long this will last. Long enough to make them think twice, Zenter said, still cradling his adored contraption as if it were his firstborn. That'll show him not to mess with us. Corlin, who'd taken the opportunity to collapse into the nearest chair, nodded. For now, we've got the upper hand. Let's make the most of it. Thalron turned to gaze out at the swirling clouds of Jupiter, the view as mesmerizing as it was intimidating. The universe throws a hell of a curveball, he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. But we've got a good swing. Vance, leaning against a bulkhead with a satisfied smirk, added, "Here's to surviving another day in this cosmic circus." Mackie snorted. "Surviving's one way to put it." "I prefer winning against all odds." "Sounds better," Juno agreed, finally sitting up from her position on the floor. "Let's stick with that." The crew settled into their routines, the immediate threat abated. The Aegis would need repairs, something it always needed, but for now they'd bought themselves time. Time to assess, to plan, and maybe even to sleep without one eye open. As Thalron watched his team, a ragtag group of brilliant lunatics, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Against all odds, they'd managed to turn the tide, to fight back against a universe that seemed hell-bent on their destruction. "Let's get a systems check started," he instructed, already moving towards the console to assist. "Let's see if there's anything else we can fix while we're on a roll." Mackie, still beaming with residual pride, turned to her console, fingers flying over the keys. "Hope the universe is watching. We might be setting a record for least catastrophic day." Vance grinned, readjusting his cap, which had become a permanent fixture on his head. "We might even survive long enough to get our paychecks." Juno, standing with a stretch that elicited a symphony of pops from her joints, added, "I'll believe that when I see it." Corlin leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing on his lips. "At least we know we're smarter than the average alien, even if it took them speaking in riddles to prove it." Thalron chuckled. "Well, let's hope the next set of aliens prefers English. Gives us a bit of a head start." The Aegis hummed, a reminder of both its fragility and its resilience. They weren't out of the woods yet, not by a long shot, but they'd managed to carve out a moment of peace in a universe that rarely allowed such luxuries. Thalron settled into his chair with a sigh, glancing at the stormy giant that loomed beyond the ship's hull. "Jupiter, old buddy," he muttered, "you're not so bad when you're not trying to kill us." The crew continued their work, the atmosphere on the Aegis one of cautious optimism. They had a plan, they had a fighting chance, and most importantly, they had each other. It was a strange kind of family, one stitched together by crises and laughter in equal measure. "All right, folks," Thalron called out, breaking into his own reverie. "Let's get this ship in shape. We've got a long road ahead and a universe that won't wait for us to catch our breath." Mackie, Zenter, Juno, Vance, and Corlin each nodded, their expressions a blend of weariness and determination. They were a motley crew, bound together by the shared goal of not dying horribly. It was as good a reason as any. As the Aegis continued its orbit, the crew worked with renewed energy. They'd faced adversity and had come out the other side, a little more battered but much more resilient. In the vast expanse of space, they were small, insignificant even, but together, they were a force to be reckoned with. And as far as Thalron was concerned, that was more than enough. The Aegis continued to hum through space, like an old refrigerator that just wouldn't quit. The crew members lingered in the aftermath of their Pyrrhic victory over the alien Sudoku masters. Captain Thalron, feeling like he'd aged a decade in the past Ior, exhaled deeply and leaned back in his chair as though it owed him money. "Well, folks," Thalron began, gesturing broadly as if he was about to unveil the galaxy's best slice of pie, "we may have just made first contact with an alien race and lived to tell the tale. I say we send a message back to Earth and let them know we've met E.T., and he's a right bastard." Mackie, the resident queen of sarcasm, cracked a grin. "Can't wait to hear their response." Probably something reassuring like, "Good luck. You're on your own," gently delivered with a shrug and a wave. As the crew settled into the familiar cluttered confines of the bridge, Vance, still nursing some burned fingers from his wire wrestling match, asked, "So, how exactly do we let Earth know about our little interstellar encounter? Send a postcard. Wish you were here. Jupiter's lovely this time of year. Please leave a message after the scream." "Well, Dr. Corlin," Thalron said, turning to their part-time hermit and full-time decoder of alien jibber-jabber, Got any brilliant suggestions on how to make this sound like an S? Oh, S and not a budget sci-fi plot. Corlin, who'd been examining his data pad like it was a crystal ball, shrugged with all the enthusiasm of a man who'd found a cricket in his soup. We keep it simple. We tell them the truth. Aliens are here, their Sudoku's a real head-scratcher, and if we don't figure it out, Earth's going to need a lot more therapists. Juno, still rubbing her temples like she was trying to erase the headache through sheer willpower, added, "You think anyone on Earth is going to believe us? They'll think it's one of those weird social media pranks." Aliens disrupted our comms with crossword puzzle sounds like tabloid gold. Zenter, ever the mad scientist, looked up from his beloved contraption. We could always throw in something about the aliens' taste in music, really freak them out. That'll get their attention. He paused, a devilish glint in his eyes. Or we could just beam them a picture of Jupiter and see if they notice the giant help we've scrawled across its surface. Thalron chuckled. Or we could just send the data, let the eggheads back home do the heavy lifting. They love that kind of stuff, deciphering alien messages, cracking codes. They'll eat it up like it's fresh gossip. Mackie leaned over her console, fingers dancing across the keys with the kind of speed that suggested she was either a virtuoso or in desperate need of a bathroom break. "Message composed," she said, flashing a grin. "Keep it blunt, keep it simple. Aliens are messing with our tech. Their language is like algebra on steroids. Send backup or send aspirin." Thalron nodded, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Aspirin sounds good. Let's also suggest they might want to start working on non-verbal communication systems. Hand signals might be more than just the latest dance craze if this keeps up," Corlin added, "and maybe someone should start brushing up on their math. If we're going to tango with these aliens again, we might as well be able to ask for the bathroom without starting a war." Vance, who had spent the last 10 minutes trying to get a stubborn panel back into place, chimed in, "I just hope Earth sends us something useful. Last time they sent supplies, we got 20 crates of hashtags and 2 of actual food." "All right," Thalron said, taking a deep breath. "Let's send it. If nothing else, it'll give them something to talk about other than the next political scandal or celebrity meltdown." The message was sent with a beep that echoed through the cabin, a sound that felt oddly final, like sending an email and immediately wishing you could unsend it. "Now what?" Juno asked, stretching her legs, grateful for a moment's reprieve. "Do we sit around and wait for the universe to throw another curveball?" "Pretty much," Thalron replied. "We're in a holding pattern until Earth gets back to us, but in the meantime, let's keep our eyes peeled and our wits sharp. If I've learned anything out here, it's that space doesn't give out participation trophies." The crew nodded, each one settling into their tasks with the kind of weary acceptance you'd expect from people who habitually lived in a state of managed chaos. The ship might have gotten quieter, but their brains were still buzzing with the implications of what they'd just done. "Do you ever get the feeling," Vance said, his voice carrying a hint of nostalgia, "that maybe you're too small for the universe but just big enough to screw things up?" "All the time," Mackie replied with a chuckle, "but at least we're screwing up together. It's like a group project where no one knows what the hell they are doing." Zenter snorted. "Hey, I resemble that remark. Besides, chaos theory suggests that even our incompetence could have exciting outcomes." Thalron, looking out at the swirling chaos of Jupiter, couldn't help but feel a twist of irony. Here they were, a ragtag group of humans, attempting to outsmart an alien race with the intellectual equivalent of a crossword puzzle. Yet somehow, they'd managed to hold their own. "All right," Thalron said, breaking the momentary silence, "let's get back to work. This ship's not going to repair itself, and we can't count on a Deus Ex Machina to save us." The crew dispersed across the ship, each person tackling their assigned tasks. There were wires to untangle, systems to check, and enough duct tape to make even the most dubious engineer proud. Vance, with his hands deep in the guts of the ship, muttered, "You know, if we make it out of this, remind me to put in for a vacation. Somewhere quiet where the most alien thing I'll see is a fly. Juno replied from her post across the room, "Think Earth will let us back in. We might be too radioactive by now." "Hey, we stopped the ship from exploding," Mackie chimed in.